How's it going, everyone? It is I, Anime Outlet, and this is What If Deku Had a Time Quirk, the movie. Sit back, relax, and enjoy, and now, let's begin. Congratulations, Mrs. Midoriya. You are now the proud mother of a healthy young boy. The doctor would hand Inko her baby, as she would then smile down at it, knowing that the next couple of years of her life were only going to go up from there. So we then cut 4 years into the future, as we see a young Izuku running around excitedly, flying around his All Might action figure, just leaping in the air and excitedly yelling, "I can't wait to become the #1 hero!" As he would then start mumbling and talking about how he's going to become the greatest hero of all time, as Inko would then just smile down at the beaming just ball of sunshine that was in front of her. "Izuku, that's great and all, but can you please go put your shoes on? Once you do that, we can leave to go see what your quirk is at the quirk doctor's office." As Izuku would, his eyes and head would bolt right towards Inko, having heard what she said, before rushing off to where his shoes were located, slipping them on over his feet, before excitedly jumping over to his mom, just saying, "Mom, can we go? Can we go?" As Inko would smile down at her child before saying, "Yeah, alright, Izuku, I guess we can go now." Grabbing her car keys, she would head down to where her car was, getting into it before they would then drive off to where the quirk doctor's office was. Walking into the waiting room, they would then be seated, being told that they now have to wait until they are called in, where the doctor will then take a couple of tests. After a couple minutes, Izuku's name would be called, where him and his mother would walk into a room, so the doctor would take a couple of tests before walking out. A good 30 minutes would end up passing, as Izuku would be still excitedly jittering up and down in his seat, not being able to hold his excitement to hear what his quirk was. The doctor would come in looking seriously down at some paperwork before staring right at Inko and Izuku. Inko would get chills, was thinking that Izuku possibly could be quirkless by the look of the doctor. Before all of a sudden, the doctor's mood would completely shift and change, as he would then look down towards Izuku. "Congratulations, Izuku. It appears that you have a very powerful quirk. It involves the control of time, and that's what the doctors have come up with their name for it. It's actually a quirk we've never been able to see before. I think it's one of the rarest we've ever seen, actually. I've never actually encountered someone with a time quirk, so I would tell you you're extremely lucky." As Izuku would continue on jumping up and down before jumping up in the air. "Yeah! I can't wait to become the #1 hero! I'm gonna be even better than All Might!" As the doctor and Inko would just smile down at Izuku, as Inko would then ask some further questions about how Izuku's quirk works. The doctor would just start to explain. While Izuku can pause time and restart it after he pauses it, and he can also fast forward time and rewind it. His quirk is very, very dangerous. I suggest you actually contact your local pro hero and they could possibly train him to use his quirk a lot better. Inko would nod her head as him or her and Izuku would then go off to their car, sitting down in their car, as Inko would then ring up her husband, Izuku's father, explaining to him how Izuku had a very powerful quirk and that they're going to need to contact some heroes so that Izuku can control it. As Izuku's father was an extremely powerful businessman, however, he had to work on the other side of the globe, so they really couldn't see him too much. So, as he would then explain to them what they should possibly do, he would then give them a number that he was able to find through his extensive lists of contacts. Inko would call the number up, as it would then ring, and after a couple of minutes, cars would end up rolling in as people would barge in it to Inko and Izuku's home after they had arrived there, where they would then start looking at Izuku, asking him if he's had any experiences with his quirk yet. However, he had none just yet. He hadn't awakened it just yet. They told him that he can't go to school until he awakens his quirk, and that he's going to have to train with them for at least a year before he can go back to his public school life, as they don't want him to have just some sort of outburst if something doesn't go his way. That's not what Izuku would do, as he's been raised right. He's not some spoiled brat that would go having temper tantrum if he happened to not like something. So as Izuku would have all these people just testing him and training him, Finally, his quirk would awaken, causing Izuku to rewind a tree back into its first stages as a sapling. The people around him would look on in awe as the tree would be seen aging backwards, slowly regressing in size before it was then a sapling. Izuku's hands were glowing as he was touching the tree, as everyone would look on in complete shock. Before Izuku would take his hand off, his hands would then stop glowing, as Izuku would look down at his hands in pure excitement. From then on, a year would end up passing with Izuku being trained, as his quirk would easily just completely surpass some people that were even heroes at that point, as these people were very powerful trainers and they have trained many people before, as they were actually one of the groups involved in training the hero Hawks. So as Izuku would place it down his hand, he would then be seen transforming a tree back with ease, much like what he had done when he had awakened his quirk. So as Izuku would continue on practicing this, rewinding the tree or then fast-forwarding it until it's back to the same stage it was at. Izuku would also practice pausing time, grabbing something from across the room, and then restarting time back in the same position. He would continue on doing this until he had an absolute control of his quirk. They didn't want Izuku to do something crazy and possibly disrupt the entire flow of time, because that's just how powerful Izuku's quirk really is. So, as Izuku would then be transitioned back into public school, many of his friends, prior to his quirk just generating, they would ask him where he had been, where he would then tell them how he had actually been training with his quirk, as it's kind of dangerous, but it's really cool though. Many of them would beg Izuku to tell them what his quirk was, but he was forbidden to tell them, knowing as the people who had basically just trained him told him that if he were to tell someone what his quirk was, his family would be at risk of endangerment, as his quirk was very powerful and the hands of very scary villainous people would want to take it from him. Izuku would be confused what they mean by take his quirk. One cannot simply just take my quirk, that doesn't make sense, Izuku would say. However, they would just disregard Izuku, telling him that there's someone with a quirk out there that could possibly take his quirk, and that he needs to be careful around someone like that. As Izuku would nod his head before just telling all of his classmates that his mother told him to keep it a secret. Many of the people would begin to see Izuku as lying to them, but they wouldn't care. Izuku was a happy person for all and was just seen as one of the best friends to have. And with the promise of Izuku telling them his quirk one day when he becomes the #1 pro hero, many of them just knew Izuku had the confidence. Remember, they're still quite young. So as the years would end up passing, people would continue on seeing Izuku and how he would end up growing and growing in strength. Many people thought Bakugo was strong with his flashy explosion quirk, but seeing how Izuku just looked like a god compared to Bakugo, he didn't even have to use his quirk. He just continued on training with the people helping him, knowing that Izuku had the power to completely destroy the villainous world, or the villain underworld that was there, saving thousands of millions of lives. So these people knew they had to train Izuku right, and they would spend almost every hour training him with little to no pay from the Midoriya family, knowing that they probably didn't have the money to expend on all these resources they're using to train on Izuku. So with the funding of other heroes hearing about this just prodigy Izuku, they would also help it, mainly with All Might and his hero agency, wanting to see what this kid could possibly do. So with all of this backing and all of this, Izuku would end up being recommended to UA, as word would end up spreading about how Izuku wasn't even going to be taking the normal entrance exams, he was taking the recommended exams, and people still had no clue what his quirk even was. They were just shocked. They've never heard about what Izuku's quirk was, but yet he's taking the recommended exam. Even Bakugo has an insanely powerful quirk, but he's not in the recommended exam. What type of quirk does Izuku possibly have? Many theories would pop up over the years saying that he has some sort of power 100 times stronger than All Might's or something, but many of them just couldn't grasp a hold of the real truth about Izuku's quirk. So as 10 months would end up passing from Izuku's final day in school, he would end up walking onto the UA campus to see it was almost completely bare, only seeing 1 to 2 more people, as they would then be seated in a massive auditorium that was completely empty. The regular exams had been held a couple days prior, and now it was time for the recommended exams. Hello, UA students. Well, not UA students yet. It really doesn't matter. You're all basically going to make it into UA. This is basically just putting you at which class you should be in. And I know since you've been recommended, you're going to make one of the hero courses. So, depending on how you perform, you'll be put into Class 1A or Class 1B. Just know you're the future generation of heroes, and this shouldn't be taken lightly. So anyway, we've already tested your written capabilities and looked at your extensive test background through your years of school. So now we're going to test your hero capabilities, your quirk capabilities. So, let's do that. As they would then be told all about how the entrance exam was going to be. How there was different sorts of robots, a 1-pointer, 2-pointer, 3-pointer, and a 0-pointer that is best just to be avoided as it is the toughest robot to defeat. As they would all be told about this, the couple 10 of them possibly, would be shoved into a hallway or corridor where the doors would end up opening. Many of them would rush out, including Izuku. However, Izuku would then stop time, as he would then rush around the city before looking around to see where the biggest horde of robots possibly could be. With all of Izuku's training, he learned how to focus his rewind, fast forward, or pausing time on a certain amount of objects. So Izuku would see a horde of robots that he deemed the biggest, as it was a horde of 3-pointers and 2-pointers. He would then just cause time to continue moving again, where he would then summon his glowing power, as his hands would start to glow a bright yellow, where the crowd of robots would all of a sudden stop moving, as Izuku had stopped their time, where they would then start fast-forwarding, as the metal would then be seen corroding and rusting away, before it would then turn to dust. Nezu and some of the other teachers there would see Izuku, how he had all of a sudden just teleported into another area, and it had all of a sudden the robots were just deteriorating into fine dust. They had heard about this mysterious child, as Nezu, after seeing one instance of Izuku's quirk, knew right away that that kid was destined to become a great hero. He didn't even have the strength. Izuku had immense strength, but he didn't even need it. He could use his quirk from afar, from a close distance. His quirk was one of the most well-rounded quirks he had ever seen. He would also start thinking what Izuku's flaw in his quirk could be. There's always a fatal flaw in each quirk that could possibly end up killing a hero, and that's one of the things the teachers are there to find out, knowing that if they don't find it out, their students could possibly be killed in a training exercise even, as they needed to end up realizing what their weakness could possibly be. Izuku would continue on his strategy of pausing time, looking for a horde of robots, before then making time start up again, as he would then stop the time for the horde of robots, fast-forwarding them or rewinding them until a stage of where he would just deem them destroyed, as he would end up getting the points from that. However, all of a sudden, the ground would end up starting to shake, as Izuku would look up to see 3 0-pointers staring down at Izuku. Nezu had decided to make something interesting before slamming a red button, releasing the 0-pointer army. Sure, it wasn't like a mass horde of these smaller robots, but it was quite a lot. These 0-pointers are massive, towering over Izuku and the city beneath them like huge skyscrapers. So, as Izuku would look up to it, all of a sudden he would end up hearing a cry for help, as he would look down the street to see someone caught in some of the rubble from a falling building, as they were yelling for help as they were in the direct path of a stomping robot foot. As Izuku would see the foot closing in, he would stop time before rushing in to where the person was. He'd stopped time too much, as he can only stop time for a limited amount of time, one of his weaknesses, but he can build up that endurance over a period of training and time. So, say Izuku could only stop time for 3 seconds when he first got his quirk. However, if he trained for over tens of years, he could end up stopping time for possibly over an hour at a time. But stopping time in small increments can extend that period of just time. I've said time so much in this video already. So as Izuku stops time, he would then rush over to the girl, pulling her out of the rubble, as he would then pick her up, rushing off out of the reach and distance of the 0-pointers. As Izuku would then get into behind in just a building, hiding away from all of the other robots as they were still prowling around the streets looking for other heroes or heroes in training to attack, Izuku would start up time once again before muttering under his breath that time has begun moving once more. All of a sudden, the girl would look around to see that she was not in the pile of rubble once more, as all of a sudden she could start moving her arms and legs once again. She would look on to her savior before seeing Izuku standing up. She would then put out her hand. My name's Momo Yaoyorozu. Thank you for saving me. I don't know how you did it since I didn't even see anything. Do you mind explaining to me what happened? As Izuku would then sort of laugh. Well, with the introductions, my name's Izuku Midoriya, and I was able to get to you fast enough so that I could bring you back here out of the reach of the 0-pointer. Izuku still didn't want to tell anyone, even people being his maybe classmates in the future, what his quirk could possibly be. Momo would then nod her head, seeing as Izuku was being purposely vague with his description of what had happened. As Izuku would then hear over just the intercom that there was only 10 minutes left to the test and that they better start racking up some more points before they have to shut down. Izuku would then ask her if she thinks she made it or not, where Momo would then start to question herself. I don't really know. I thought I destroyed some robots, but I'm not quite sure. Izuku then put a hand on her shoulder before looking at her. Well, if you gotta be confident more. If you've destroyed a bunch of robots, then you should be confident that you've made it. Like, I know 100% that I'm probably gonna make one of the top classes. I've already destroyed tons of robots. So if you think you've done the same, you should be confident that you're gonna make it. That's one of the other traits of being a hero. You gotta be confident in your abilities. Because if a villain sees through that you're not gonna be confident, he could use that to his advantage. As Momo would nod her head from the short, just teaching lesson that Izuku had done about being a hero, he would then rush off to destroy more robots, where Momo would then do the same. As the test would end up passing, Izuku would walk home, as he would then sit down on the couch, where his mother would then hand him a glass of water before asking him how he did. I think I did great. Thanks for asking. I actually hope I get to the top class. I think it's going to be quite fun. As his mother would nod his head before she would then ask when a letter in the mail or an email was supposed to be given out. Izuku would think before saying, I'm not quite sure actually. Guess it's now just a long wait. As Izuku would then go outside to continue on some training regimens that he had not finished from that morning. A couple weeks would end up passing as Inka would rush into Izuku's room, bursting in before showing Izuku a letter addressed to him, as she would slam it down on Izuku's desk as there was a bright embedded UA symbol in gold written right on the envelope. Do you think it's your acceptance letter? Izuku would try to calm his mom down. Wow, how do we even know that I got accepted? We should just slow things down a bit, Mom. As Izuku would open up the letter before a small disc would end up popping out. Hello, Izuku Midoriya, and possibly other family members of Izuku. I would just like to congratulate you as you actually got the first out of all examinees, not only in the recommended test, but also in the normal student test. Congratulations, Izuku. I'd also like to welcome you to the first year Class 1A, as your teacher this year will be someone by the name of Shota Aizawa. If you haven't heard of name, he's probably a hero known as Eraserhead, another hero that likes to hide in the shadows. So he might not be known to many of you. As Nezu would then say, "Congratulations, Izuku," before the disc would then shut off, as a message would then play, self-destructing in 5 seconds. 5, 4, Izuku would just look at the device as it would then explode, creating a small, just burnt mark on Izuku's desk. That's kind of cool. Izuku would touch it before his mother would then congratulate her son before walking out of the room. The next day would end up passing as a package would end up arriving on their front door. Izuku would look at it as he would then open it since it was addressed to him, where he would see his UA uniform. Deciding to put it on, he would look on in amazement, seeing that it fit him perfectly. He had no clue how done it, as he never put his size of uniform or shirt anywhere, as he was just kind of confused on how they were possibly able to do it. As his solution was, well, it's UA after all. Of course they're going to be doing stuff like that, being able to find what my shirt size is without even me telling them. As the next day would end up passing, Izuku would walk in to the school, as he would end up sitting down, where the same black-haired girl would end up walking up to him. "Oh, hey Izuku, it's me, Momo. I'm not sure if you forgot about me or not. I see you've made it into Class 1A. Congratulations. I was really hoping I'd make it into your class too." Izuku would look on before saying, "Oh yeah, congratulations to you too. See, you've made it in since you're in this classroom after all." She would decide to sit next to Izuku, as Aizawa would then walk in, before he would look on towards the rest of his class, or the class he would have to deal with for the next couple of years. "Good morning, UA students. I'd just like to start things off that the place that you're all in now can be replaced, so don't think just because you've made it into Class 1A once doesn't mean you can be kicked out of it. I can sure as heck expel you from this damn school, so don't think you're just the best of the best here, you're the most important. You gotta remember, there's always someone trying to take your spot. You're in the top class, and so the Class 1A people or the Class 1B people are looking on to try to take that spot away from you." As Aizawa would be saying this, he would then hand out PE uniforms, as he would then tell them, "Go down, find where the locker rooms are, put your PE uniforms on, and head out to the testing site known as E." I'm skipping just the introduction, just meeting up with all the other classes and Nezu's speech and all of that. You're the top hero just class in this school for the first years, so there's no time for having to deal with all of that crap. We need to start training as soon as possible. You're the next generation of heroes, after all. All the time we wait is another life lost, so let's begin. You all have 20 minutes to make it down there. You better start going or else I'll expel you." As all of them would stand up from their seats, rushing off, as Izuku would do the same, as he would look down to his watch before starting a 20-minute timer. As Izuku would walk off to the locker rooms, Momo would end up asking him why he wasn't running, which Izuku would just say he knows he's gonna make it. It's gonna be quite easy. As Izuku would then stop time, where he would then go down to the locker room, put on his PE uniform, and would then find testing site E. As he would then sit down under the lone tree in the dirt patch and field, he would end up waiting for Aizawa to arrive along with the rest of his class. As he would mutter under his breath that time has begun moving once again, he would look around to see that Aizawa was nowhere even near and possibly not even left the UA main building. So as Izuku would sit there waiting, Aizawa would finally stroll in with about 10 minutes left to spare, as finally some of his classmates would also arrive, following Aizawa as well. "Well, it appears someone actually got here before us. That's quite impressive. Wait, I didn't even see you in the locker rooms. I just assumed you were late or something. How'd you make it down here so fast? Izuku would then shrug, saying that it's a secret, as they would then begin the test that Aizawa had done. As Aizawa would toss a ball to Izuku and would ask him to throw it, as Izuku would step inside the circle before winding back his arm, throwing the ball as far as he possibly could. However, before the ball could even get in arm's reach just in front of Izuku, Izuku would stop the time on the ball before hitting the ball as hard as he possibly could with his hand, just slamming his fist into the ball at least a couple of times, as Izuku would then stop the time stop on the ball, as the forward momentum hitting the ball would then cause the ball to be sent flying, rushing off, as the ball would only go around 500 meters. Many of the class would look on in shock at what Izuku had done. Many of them would just excitedly shout that this is going to be a fun year, being able to use their quirks. They've never been able to do it in something like this, after all. Aizawa would only just be confused. Oh, you think you're going to have fun? I'll bet you're going to eat your words after some of the things you're going to have to do for training this school year. Sawa would say ruthlessly towards his students before they would continue on with the tests, as Izuku could perform well in some of them while performing not so well in others. His quirk wasn't the most, best quirk for some of these tests. Sure, he could stop time, rewind, and fast forward it, but it's not like he's going to be the absolute all might with strength for a grip test or something. So with Izuku just doing some of the tests while not just being first in others, Izuku would get around 7th place, finishing in the middle of the pack. However, many of the students would look on towards the person in first, being Momo Yaoyorozu. With her quirk being able to create anything, she was able to use devices that she had learned about prior to the events to help her just to easily be able to beat many of the tests that Aizawa had assigned. As all of the students would end up walking off back to the classroom, they would end up sitting down where Aizawa would then tell them they are now free to go for the rest of the day, and please don't do anything stupid. The next couple of weeks they're going to only have some orientation and no form of training. Their hero class is scheduled a month from today, so I suggest you preparing, as if you're out of shape for that, I'll consider moving you down to even one of the general courses, Aizawa would say before walking out of his classroom. All of the students would nod their head at what Aizawa had said before rushing off back to their homes to continue on with their daily life. Now a month would end up passing as they would all walk into school, having marked it down on their calendars that today was their first hero class. They couldn't wait, as All Might would then be seen rushing down the hall. However, many of the students wouldn't know who this was rushing down the hallway, only hearing stomping from inside the classroom. As many of the students would look on towards the door, they would all of a sudden see it slam open, bursting in two, as it was a sliding door, as the door would slam, breaking some of the wall that it was partially in, having Aizawa left it cracked, as All Might would stand there with his hands on his sides, exclaiming, "I am here, as your new hero teacher!" As All Might would then walk over to the middle of the classroom near the front side before just laughing. "Ha, I bet you didn't expect that entrance, did you? Well, anyways, many of you know that I'm All Might. I'd be actually kind of surprised if you didn't know who I was. So, anyone have any questions to ask me? I'm assuming this is one of your first times seeing the number one hero after all." Many of Izuku's classmates would raise his hand, as Momo would end up raising her hand before pointing at the door and wall. "Do you know why you did that? You damaged our classroom." As All Might would then look behind him to see the door shattered in two, along with some of the wall and drywall coming apart. As All Might would then just say, "Sorry about that." Scratching his head, he would then begin with what the lesson was today. "So, class, today we're going to be doing some small-scale exercises leading up to a bigger event. right before a field trip. You'll know more about it when it's coming up. So anyway, we're going to be doing some major training. So, all of you are going to be writing down some of the abilities that your quirk can do, and we'll be having one of our specialists come in to give you a certain exercise to be training your quirk. You better be training at your absolute hardest. So we're going to be looking for who should be just the star of this class. Well, all of you are stars of this class. It doesn't really matter. There's really no number one. The main thing in hero is just being a hero in general is teamwork. So we're going to be working on training up your quirks, making them stronger, and your overall teamwork abilities. As the major event we're going to be doing before your field trip is going to be a teamwork exercise. One more thing, class. You can't become heroes without your hero costumes, of course. All Might would slam his finger down onto a massive red button, as all of a sudden, some briefcases would start to pile out of the wall behind All Might. As everyone would look on in shock, All Might would then start to speak again. Well, after you all put in your hero designs for the support course to make, we decided to make it happen earlier than expected. So here's your hero costumes. Grab your suitcase labeled by your seat number, then head down to the locker rooms, get changed, and then head out to the training grounds, and that's where we're going to be training. We have some special analysts that will be talking to you all about what your quirks are so that they can give you some accurate training exercises. Everyone would go down, put their hero costumes on before heading down to the training field. Once they would arrive there, they would see a massive group of just analysts and people that knew how to train everyone, as they would then be sitting there. Izuku recognized them as he saw a logo on some of their shirts. It was the same just a group and team that had worked with him. It wasn't the exact same team, but rather the company. As Izuku would see this, Yue or All Might would then walk up to all of them before telling them to go up and talk to one of them, and they'll explain what their quirks are, and you all just have to try to find out what it is. At least that's what we want you to do. Yeah, we know, All Might. Nezu told us everything. You can go sit over there and watch or something, or maybe help one of us. I don't really know. Alright, hello, Class 1A. We're here to try to help you with your training. So, I will now assign each of you to one of our special analysts so that they can see which training exercise would perfectly fit your quirk and needs. As the person there leading the training exercise would match everyone up, as Izuku would end up going with the leader. Hello, Izuku. It appears we meet again. Izuku would nod his head as this was the same person that had led the other group to help train Izuku. So do you have anything in mind for me in training? The person would nod his head before telling Izuku that he wants him to age this tiny seed into a massive tomato plant, as Izuku would nod his head, as he would then plant it into the ground before focusing his energy as his hands would start to light up, as all of a sudden the seed would start to grow and sprout into a massive tomato plant, as the person would nod their head. Now, right as Izuku was about to continue on going, the person would stop him. Now I want you to rewind it back to when it was a seed. As Izuku would do this, he would continue on rewinding it, as it would then turn back into a seed, as Izuku would look up towards the person. What appears your rewind and fast-forwarding abilities have pretty much gone to their limit. It's quite obvious to see this. There really can't be anything much else to this rewind and fast-forward thing besides just rewinding time on certain things. However, I do have a certain idea. Do you think you could heal something? As the person would whip out a knife out of their pocket before slashing their arm right on just the forearm right before the hand. As Izuku would look on in shock, not thinking that this person would go to such extremes. As Izuku would look at the now bleeding cut, he would walk over to it, his hand now glowing, as he would ask it, "Do you think I should fast forward it or rewind it?" Well, either way could actually work. If you think about it, rewinding it would make it so that it never happened, while fast-forwarding it would just fast-forward the healing process. However, I think you should rewind it just in case it might get infected if something were to fly in it, and fast forwarding it wouldn't really work too well, speeding up the infection as well. Izuku would nod his head before rewinding his arm to the point that it just never had the cut on it to begin with, as Izuku now had learned a new ability that he can heal things, and that it doesn't need to, well, he can heal things now, and he can focus on only a certain part, as Izuku would then walk up to a tree before looking at a branch on it, as he would then rewind the branch to the point where it was just tiny, hanging on to the tree. The person would nod his head, thinking, so it appears you still have some more abilities with your rewind and fast forward. But now you should probably just start training with your stopping time ability and try to get it to as long as you possibly can. Izuku would nod his head, knowing that that's probably the best too, as it's its most powerful ability. So Izuku would try to stop time, stopping it, and would then try to hold it as long as possible, getting it to around a minute before time would start moving once again, as Izuku would then look back to him, before he would ask how long did he do it. Izuku would answer with 60 seconds, so the person would nod. You can defeat a villain in only 60 seconds, but say if it's a very hard one, that might not be the case. Since you don't really have any sort of special abilities beyond your time, I really suggest you should get some sort of weapon to help combat your time skip. Say sort of like an energy blade or something. We're still working on the idea of it, because your fast forward and rewind work quite well as weapons in their own right. But just in case you don't think of using them or you can't use them at the time, like you can't use your hands, you should possibly think about other attacks you could use. Izuku would nod his head, but knowing that it would be quite hard for something like that to actually come into a real life idea. Well, not real life, for an idea, it just is impossible to think of something like that unless Izuku could fire out some sort of bullet with his mouth or something, just in case someone had his hands tied above him or tied up to the point where he couldn't use them. As Izuku would doing this, he would all of a sudden ask, wait, do you think I can not use my hands for my rewind and fast forward ability? The person thinking there would ask Izuku if he should try, which Izuku would then look back to the branch he had just did and would start to focus, thinking if it should fast forward back into the point it was. As Izuku would do this, the branch would start to slowly move. However, it wasn't as just precise as Izuku's hands. Sure, it got there, but it's not going to be to the best extent if it were to be healing. So Izuku had come to the final conclusion that healing he should do it with his hands, while if it's something more broad, like taking down a villain or rewinding them back to their stage where they were a baby, he should probably just do it with his mind, say if he can't get close enough to them in range for his hands to really work too well. As Izuku thinking this, he would then be told that the day was up, that they had spent hours training already. The time had sort of passed quite quickly, as they would all then walk back to the classroom, where the analysts would then leave, as they would then be sitting there waiting for the next thing to happen. Now a week would pass of this training happening every single day, with Izuku finding out newer and newer abilities, how close he could use his fast-forward rewind, and how far he could do it, all of that, as finally Friday would appear. Alright, class, the analysts have left and your training has now finished. Hopefully you all learned great techniques to use your training here at UA, as you're going to be given a lot of free time to train. So just make sure whenever you get free time, you dedicate at least half of it to training your quirks. That's the true dedication we're looking for here for the top heroes. So, now what we are going to be doing is called the Heroes vs. Villains assignment. Basically, there's going to be two teams within a building, the villain team and the hero team. The villain team will be forced to hide a device within it, while the hero team will be forced to walk in there and touch the device to win or capture both of them. As Izuku would be thinking of this, All Might would then start to draw the teams. While the first team is Izuku versus Izuku, and let me see here, All Might would pull out another name before seeing it was Bakugo Katsuki. The first team, the heroes, will be Bakugo Katsuki and Izuku Midoriya, while the second team will be Todoroki, Shoto, and Momo Yaoyorozu, All Might would say. As the class would nod their heads, as All Might would then finish making the teams. Alright, go down to the locker rooms, get changed into your hero costumes, and now head over to City Site A. That's where we will find the building that the first two teams will be just taking place with their fight in. All of them would head down there as they would then get changed, heading off to the city as they would then arrive. Alright, villain team, you may now head in. Shoto, Todoroki, and Momo Yaoyorozu would head in, grabbing the device on their way before hiding it in one of the random floors, as they would then start to build up the fences using Momo's Quirk, as Izuku and Bakugo would then be told that they may now head in. Now, Izuku and Bakugo don't have the such rocky relationship that they do in canon My Hero Academia. Bakugo just learned to respect Izuku because of how powerful his quirk was said to be, as Bakugo had never saw it in person, as many of the people actually hadn't seen Bakugo's quirk in its full extent, only seeing these sparks fly as a sort of warning. So if Bakugo can get away with that, Izuku could get away with much worse, just saying he doesn't use it, and it's really not just being able to show you. It's actually quite hard to show someone what his quirk is actually capable of. So Bakugo would learn to respect Izuku, as they would end up becoming known as the two most powerful students in all of just the city, as they were seen as the best hero prospects coming out of middle school, while Bakugo was still a little more unknown. Izuku had a name spread far and wide, having a mysterious quirk. This is to the disappointment of all of the trainers, as the people in Izuku's class and school had spread rumors about how powerful his quirk was far and throughout the city, causing Izuku to be sort of a local celebrity, with people thinking he's going to be the number one hero, even though they hadn't seen his quirk yet, which was quite strange for them to believe something such like that can be so easily lied about. So as both Izuku and Bakugo would walk in, Izuku would tell Bakugo that they need to come up with a plan. Izuku would tell him that he should probably just stop time real quick and beat them, as Bakugo would look over towards Izuku and would ask him, what does he mean? Well, I think it's finally time you realize what my quirk is. I can stop and restart time while also fast-forwarding and rewinding certain times on things. I can't really go too far without explaining it, and since we need a plan, I might as well tell you what it is. Bakugo would nod his head before telling him that they can go the easy way out, stopping time as soon as Izuku gets up to the final floor where their device is probably located, stopping time and basically just touching it, easily giving them the win, or beating both of them, or just trying to beat them to get more of glory. Izuku would say he probably shouldn't go with the easy way out, as that's never always the best option, especially if we're looking to gain more experience. Bakugo would nod his head as they would then walk throughout the floors, not seeing any signs of life. Once they would finally make it up to the top floor, there they would see Momo and Todoroki standing up there, waiting for them to walk through the final door. Izuku would walk into the door as both Todoroki and Momo would get on guard, as Momo would create a bow staff, while Todoroki would slam his foot down on the ground, setting a small iceberg, slamming right towards both Izuku and Bakugo. However, Izuku would stop time before placing Bakugo right in front of Todoroki, as Izuku would go right behind Momo, as Izuku would mutter under his breath that time has begun moving once again, as Bakugo would then see Todoroki right in front of him as he would wind his fist back, slamming an explosion right into Todoroki's face, where Izuku would then quickly and easily knock out Momo with a single chop to the back of the neck. As Todoroki would be sent flying backwards, he would catch himself on the ground with his feet before running back up towards Bakugo, going for a punch. However, Izuku would put Todoroki into a chokehold before knocking him out with another chop to the neck that he had done to Momo as well, as they would then both touch the device, as All Might would give them the victory, seeing as they were able to knock out both of the villain team and touch the device in under 5 minutes. It was very clear that they were a great team together, as they would then walk back as Momo and Todoroki would end up walking back with them as well. Congratulations, Hero Team. You all did quite well, even creating a plan at the start. shows that you are quite capable of becoming great heroes. You already have great knowledge and extent of what being a hero is, being teamwork already, and we're not even 2 months into the school year. That's quite impressive. As All Might would be saying this, both of them would nod their heads, just in acceptance, as the rest of the teams would end up going. A couple months would end up passing as Izuku and Bakugo and the rest of the class would walk into school knowing that today was the day that they were going on a field trip. This is what all of their training had been going up for, as this field trip was going to be just all about rescue and all of this. They had been learning teamwork, just hero moves that they could use with each other, special kinds of moves, all of this sort of thing, but now it's going to be used to save others. They really had not learned any rescue sort of training at all up until this point. So as all of them would be just sitting in class, Aizawa would walk in before telling them that they all need to go either put their hero costumes on or PE uniforms and head down to the bus bay. They're not waiting for anyone who's late. As he would then walk off as everyone would rush down, putting on their hero costumes before getting on to the bus bay, where they would then get onto a bus, travel off to the unforeseen simulation joint. So they would all pile out of the bus, looking on at the massive dome circular building in front of them, as many of them would look on in just pure excitement and joy as 13 would step out of the building, opening one of the doors before yelling, "Welcome, Class 1A! This is the unforeseen simulation joint, otherwise known as the USJ. Here you're going to be doing other sorts of rescue exercises and different things that are going to match your quirk quite well. We're going to see what matches your quirk in different scenarios, along with matching you up with things that don't match your quirk so well. So, why don't we head inside?" Aizawa and Ida would walk up the stairs as everyone would follow both of them, as they would then arrive up at the top of the stairs, where Aizawa and 13 would push open the doors leading into the massive building. Many of them would look on in shock at just how big this building was, where they would marvel at all of the different zones and everything that just looked crazy, as 13 would then start to explain the different zones, that there's the water zone, where a flood's going to happen, as water is going to slowly overtake a boat. You're going to have to learn how to use that, as we're also going to be using you as trying to rescue us. We're going to be going around after around 20 minutes of once you've gotten used to the zone and how everything works. We're going to be going around and you have to find a way to save us in that certain zone. So, why don't we start off with the flood zone? How about this group here? You, and all of a sudden a purple portal would start to open up in the middle of these just fountain area, as all of them would look on towards it, as many of them were thinking, is this sort of a training exercise? Is this sort of like how we're all supposed to go attack them without any word or warning? As Aizawa would look on, looking down, as he would see many villains pile out of the portal, as Aizawa would then tell them that this isn't an exercise, they all need to get back and out of that door as quickly as possible. However, before they can, a portal would open up behind them as villains would start to pile out of that portal as well. Izuku would stop time before going in and punching all of these villains as time was stopped. And all of a sudden, as time would begin moving once again, all of these villains would feel a severe punch go right onto their face, sending them flying, knocking into each other, as many of them would end up being knocked out, as many of the people would look on in shock at this, including Kurogiri, who would just put all of the people that were supposed to be on top of the staircase up there, and they were all now gone. He was confused at this, but would then travel back down to Shigaraki, as Shigaraki would then yell, "Good morning, UA! It's us, the League of Villains. You've probably heard about us a couple times in the news. Well, that doesn't really matter now. This is going to be your end. Why don't you say your final goodbyes to each other before you met a gruesome fate?" As he would then be saying this, Kurogiri would open up a portal underneath all of the students, spreading them out, scattering them throughout all of the different zones. As Izuku would be doing this, he would start to fall down into the portal, as would then try to stop time, stopping it as he would then reach over, grabbing on to one of the ledges, pulling himself up out of the portal, as he would then see some of his classmates fall through it as well, where he would help them up as time would begin moving once more, once he had helped everyone out of the portal that he could. So there were still many of his students scattered around, but there was only around 3 or 4 of him and the 2 teachers standing up at the top of the staircase. Izuku would ask Aizawa what he should do to help, as Aizawa would tell him that he needs to stay back. However, Izuku would yell for Aizawa that he's been training with professional heroes and all these people that have trained professional heroes to become a hero. He shouldn't have to be told not to help people. As Aizawa would just sigh before saying, "Fine, I guess you can help me. 13. Protect the students that are already up here, possibly go around saving the others within the zones." 13 would nod her head as both Aizawa and Izuku would jump down and would end up starting their fight against the massive horde of villains. Izuku would power up both of his hands with his rewind and fast forward in both hands, as Izuku would go around grabbing the heads of villains as they would come close to him, rewinding them or fast forwarding them into old age or making them young as a child again, as all of the villains would look on in shock at Izuku's capability and power, including Shigaraki that would look on in interest. All for one should know about this kid's quirk. It appears quite interesting, being able to people younger or older. That could be quite powerful if we were able to get our hands on it. We should possibly try to do something with it. As Kurogiri would nod his head, as Izuku would be seen just continue on doing this before stopping time, going around punching many of the villains around there, where they would then be sent flying back as time would end up getting moving again. As Izuku would do this, many of the villains would start to back up from them, where Aizawa would then come in, erasing their quirks before defeating them using his scarf or punching them with his insane martial arts. As all of this would end up being happening, the entire army would easily be decimated by the combined help of Izuku and All Might. Or not All Might, Aizawa. I've confused All Might and Aizawa so many times in my what ifs, it's kind of stupid. So Aizawa and Izuku would just destroy and decimate this entire army as Shigaraki would snap his fingers, motioning for Kurogiri to open up a portal. As Kurogiri would do this, a massive purple bird monster would step out of this portal with scars littering its body all over. "Ah, so you managed to defeat my entire army. That doesn't really matter to me, as you're not going to be able to defeat this here thing. You want to know its name before you die to its hands? It's called the Nomu, and it's the last thing you're gonna see before you die." As Kurogiri would motion his hand out, motioning for the Nomu to go and attack, as he would yell, "Nomu! Kill those 2, and then the entirety of those UA brats while you're at it." As the Nomu would scream as if giving a yes or saying that he got Shigaraki's orders, before it would jump leaping off towards Aizawa and Izuku, as Aizawa was about to erase its quirk. However, before he could, he would feel a monstrous punch connect with his cheek, as Izuku would stop time, as he would see the Nomu in a certain motion. As Izuku would see this, he would then use his rewind quirk, starting to rewind the Nomu. However, as he was doing this, time would begin moving again, where the Nomu would see Izuku behind him, as he would then backhand Izuku, sending him flying back. As Izuku would see this, Aizawa would end up being slammed down into the ground again, as Izuku would push the pile of rubble off of him, as he would race off to help Aizawa once again. As Izuku would make it there, Aizawa was struggling deeply with the Nomu, as Izuku would stop time, grabbing Aizawa from the grips of the Nomu before rushing up the stairs, before saying that time has begun moving again, putting his hands down on Aizawa's injuries, rewinding them to the point that they were never there. Aizawa would thank Izuku before looking on towards the Nomu, saying that this is going to be a very hard fight. Almost right as that happened, the Nomu would scream once again, rushing up towards them as Izuku would jump right towards where the Nomu was. Izuku would look down towards his pocket before taking something out, looking at the handle that was now in his hands. I guess it's finally time to use this. Izuku would click a button as the Nomu would finally reach the top of the stairs as Izuku would slash with the newly found energy blade in his hands. The support corps, along with the help of other heroes and funding, had managed to create a sort of energy beam with new forms of technology, and with the vast experience and brand-like ability of the company that had helped Izuku, they were able to get Izuku one of these so that he could help use it in his training, just as an even more answer to if his quirks just don't work. Say if some odd occurrence happens to happen. So as Izuku would slash, the Nomu would fall down as its front torso would then fall back to the ground as its legs would be standing there completely still, so the legs would fall to its knees before slamming down to the ground. While for the Nomu's body would then instantly regenerate back as Izuku would look on, thinking that this is going to be a lot harder than he thought. All of a sudden, the doors would be slammed open as All Might would finally have arrived there, seeing that the Nomu was there. All Might, who had a smile on his face before right about to say, "I am here," would look on to see all of the villain bodies and the Nomu there, as he would rush in, jumping right at the villain or the Nomu, grabbing its head, slamming it into its knee, as it would then jump back. "Ah, All Might, you finally arrived. I guessed you'd finally show your ugly head here after a while. Guess you might have been busy doing something and letting your students die. I'm gonna make an assumption and say half of them are already dead. So I suggest you better start counting your days here as the teacher at UA. As you're not the best teacher letting half your class die, are you, All Might?" As All Might would disregard this, only using it to fuel his anger, as he would continue on punching the Nomu, as Izuku would yell that All Might needs to step back. All Might would do this as Izuku, now having his energy blade in hand, would then lift it up above his head, slamming it down into the Nomu's skull and brain area, completely cutting it in half, as Izuku would cut the entire Nomu in just two. Right as Izuku's blade made contact with the brain of the Nomu, it would scream out a massive shriek of pain as the Nomu's two halves would fall apart as Izuku had made his way through the entire Nomu. As Shigaraki, seeing as Izuku had defeated the Nomu and had found its key weakness, he would rush off through the portal of Kurogiri as he would and ask Kurogiri to make a portal to where All For One's hideout was. As he would do this, he would then kneel down before All For One, before telling him all about how powerful Izuku's quirk was, and saying that there's some kid. He can possibly fast forward and rewind someone's age. He's quite skillful in his craft. I suggest you possibly try to kidnap him and take his quirk, or maybe even make him into a Nomu. He'd make quite the powerful one, you know. All For One would nod his head before telling him that type of quirk would be quite powerful if he could make his enemies older and basically put them out of service, or possibly even make them younger and make them into villains that could possibly help fight against the others. As All For One would be nodding about this, he would then just tell Shigaraki that he did good, but where's the Nomu? Shigaraki would tell him, unfortunately, that damn kid who has the power is able to destroy it. That's why I wanted to tell you this. He's quite skillful. He'd make a great villain if you were to brainwash him. Possibly turn him back into a villain if you were to steal his quirk and then give it back to him. All For One would nod his head once more as we now cut back to All Might and Izuku in the USJ. They would rush around the USJ, saving all of the different students around there, as All Might would ask them if they are hurt or not, which they would then say no. All Might was in shock. Everywhere he went, there was villain bodies laying everywhere. His class and students had been trained so well that they were able to easily defeat these thugs. It was quite insane. He never thought his class would be able to take care of past villains before, thinking that they still had no experience with having to deal with the stress of being a hero. However, they were easily able to take them down, even though their lives were at risk. And he was quite proud of the way he had taught them, as seeing as they were already quite strong, being able to defeat all those villains without the help of a pro hero already. As they would then collect all of the students, Aizawa would take roll call, making sure that everyone was there, as the police would end up being called, arriving on the scene with many armored vehicles, packing in all of the different villains into the vehicles, just making sure that they would end up going off to prison, as many of them would take these student statements just all about this certain thing. All Might would then tell them that they need to keep this under wraps. Now, the heroes would already nod their head, as they were the UA campus police, as the UA already had an entire police force just as an added security measure. Yep, we already know, All Might. Seeing as it's your still first year, I decided to let you know that this is actually the campus police. We actually have our own jail, but we're not going to be having them here. The jail's actually miles off of campus in the middle of nowhere, so even if they do escape, they'll probably die of dehydration or something. All Might would nod his head, as he would then just go back to making sure everyone was okay, and anyone who had supposedly been injured, Izuku would be tasked with helping them, rewinding just their certain part of their body that was injured back to the point that it just wasn't injured at all. Hello, Izuku. Izuku would look on towards Nezu, who had just called him down to his office, as everyone in his class had just started to just leave, as they had been dismissed by their teacher. I've been wondering to ask you. Aizawa told me about something, how you can heal him. You healed his injuries? Do you think you could possibly do a favor for me? Izuku would nod his head, agreeing with Nezu, as All Might would then step in, as he would lift up his shirt, revealing a massive scar on his upper body. What the hell did you do, All Might? That scar's crazy! All Might would then just sort of laugh. Well, it was a fight with a villain by the name of All For One. He's one of the biggest villains in this country that I know of, so yeah, he's quite strong, as you can see. As the all-powerful All Might got injured, something many people can't really imagine. Izuku's hands would start to glow as he would then ask All Might what he wants him to do. Please just try to heal this injury. I'm not getting any younger, and with this, I'm basically aging twice as fast. Izuku would put his hands on All Might before backing up, as All Might would then start to age backwards. Izuku had just decided it would be best to put All Might back in his prime, as All Might would start to age backwards, and once Izuku was done, All Might would feel instantly stronger. His scar was not there at all anymore, as he could finally breathe in fully like he used to be able to do. See, he would now not even be able to go into his small might form. Sure, he can, but he can now sit in his big might form or all might form for however long he wants to, as his injuries completely passed. Izuku had put him in his complete prime. As All Might would be stretching, feeling out all of his muscles and strength, he would then thank Izuku for this before walking away. Nezu would also thank Izuku before telling him he's dismissed for the next week, while UA is doing some safety precautions and just upgrades to their security. Izuku would nod his head. However, while that week was going on, teachers would be going to all of the students, just parents' houses and houses, asking their parents if they would be able to sign this permission slip saying that they can move into the dorms for their own safety. Many of the parents would agree, while some of them didn't, but would end up being persuaded with a sum of money. So, as all of them would end up moving into the dorms during that week, as they would all now be sitting on the UA campus in their Class 1A, just dorm room, or just dorm building, where they would all just be sitting there. You guys excited for the sports festival? I can't wait to compete in it. I'm gonna get first. Many of them would just be telling themselves that, even though they knew they'd probably stand no chance to someone like Bakugo, Todoroki, or Izuku. However, they'd probably actually stand a chance, as many of them have some critical flaws that could actually be overused or used against them. However, many of them are too blind to see what their flaws actually are. So, as the week would pass, all of the students would head into school the next day, where Aizawa would then meet them. Alright, class, you know the drill. We've practiced this
to make it as quick as possible, head down to the bus bay, and then we'll end up going to the just sports festival coliseum, I guess. All of the students would then pile out of the classroom before heading down to the bus bay. They would get on where it would then transfer them to the sports coliseum, as they would then head down to the class 1A locker rooms. Once they would end up arriving in there, they would all see the lockers just labeled with their names, where they would then take out their things, put their PE uniform on, and then head out into the waiting room. As they would be sitting there, they would end up hearing their names called, and that they have 10 more minutes until they head out onto the field. Many of them would be excited and wishing each other good luck, as the 10 minutes would pass quite quickly. Once over, the intercom would then say, "Alright, Class 1A, you may now head out," as these solid concrete doors would slowly creak open, as all of them would walk out, as the crowd would erupt into cheering. Here was the next generation of heroes, and they were so excited. So, as this would end up happening, Midnight would ask for the first year representative, where Bakugo would then step up, since he got the most out of the normal exams. Even though Izuku had gotten more points in the recommended exams, Bakugo still was in the normal exams, and that's what they just decided to count it on. So Bakugo would come up there, speak that he's going to win, before heading back down, as many of the people below him in Bakugo's mind, or being everyone from Class 1B and below, are just thinking of how arrogant he is and how they're going to smash his face in during the sports festival. The first event would end up starting. It is going to be a race, as this race is going to have many different obstacles you're going to have to avoid, especially a massive robot army. So as heroes would then jump in, pushing everyone in to these tiny, cramped hallways, they would then be told that the race is now beginning in 5, 4, 3, 2, 1. The doors would slam open as the crowd would then start pushing and shoving, trampling anyone underneath them. As this is where the most injuries would end up coming in, as they would all just rush out of the tiny hallway, pushing each other past, as Izuku would stop time right as the doors opened, slipping through the crack of the door before rushing off, easily passing through the motionless robots, as he would then make it all the way up towards just the second obstacle, this being a jumping, as Izuku would say that time has begun moving again, deciding not to hold any time, just stop moving, as that could waste a lot of energy, and he wanted to save it for the later rounds. So as Izuku would say time has begun moving again, he would see all these floating platforms that he had to jump to and from. As Izuku would see this, he would then start to jump past each other. Meanwhile, back in the crowd, we could see Bakugo jumping out, just thinking, heck yeah, of course I'm first, as he would easily blow his way past the massive army of robots, as he would then be face to face with 3 gigantic zero-pointers towering over the entire crowd of young heroes in training and just UA students. As Bakugo would see this, he would then just smirk. "This is gonna be no problem," he would say. Putting his hand on the ground, he would then explode up, launching himself up towards the face of the robot, as his hand would then flicker as sparks would end up flying out of it, as he would slam his hand right into the center of the robot's head, as a massive explosion would be released, as a massive hole would be in the massive robot's head. As he would start to fall down, crumbling backwards, Bakugo would propel himself off the top of it, using his explosions to get even further. Meanwhile, Izuku has now reached the minefield, as he stops time once again to just walk on past it, as no mines would end up being set off while time was stopped. However, as soon as Izuku made it to the finish line, all of the bombs would end up exploding right there on the path Izuku had took. So, as would end up happening, Izuku would cross the finish line, as the crowd would end up cheering, right as Bakugo had exploded the robot. So as Bakugo would smirk, "They must be cheering for me." As Izuku being first would then just go be transferred into the waiting room. Bakugo, still thinking he was in first, would easily pass through everything until he saw just a massive road where Izuku had walked. Thinking nothing of it, Bakugo would continue on before passing the finish line, where the crowd would then cheer once again. Bakugo would look up onto the scoreboard, where he would then see his name flash, and a picture of him slamming his fist into the robot, as it would then flash second place over it. He would wonder, what the hell, how did I get second? No one is in front of me. Until it hit Bakugo. As he would be transferred into the waiting room, he would then see in smiling Izuku sitting down, just saying, "Congratulations, Bakugo. How's second place feel?" The small rivalry between Izuku and Bakugo, they had basically bet on who was going to get first in the first event, which Izuku, of course, bet on himself and Bakugo on himself, too. So, how's that $20 holding up in your pocket? I presume it's not going to be there much longer since, I already won. As Bakugo would then just say, "How about this? Whoever gets first in this damn sports festival gets it." As Izuku would smile before saying, "Then it's gonna have to be double then, Bakugo, since I already won fair and square." Bakugo would then clench his fist before saying fine, as many of the more people in Class 1A would pile into the waiting room, having passed through the race. As the race would end up finishing, all of them would be sitting in the waiting room before everyone who had passed would end up being called out. The second event will be sort of a cavalry battle sort of thing. Midnight would go on to explain what this battle is going to be and all this and that, where she would then tell them that they now need to create teams, and that Izuku, being first, has a 10 million point headband. As Izuku would see this, he would then just struggle to find anyone who would want to be on his team. Izuku would know that his quirks really aren't useful in this since it's a time-based event, and since Izuku can't stop time for this, what are his fast-forward and rewinds going to do? Sure, he can fast forward or rewind anyone who gets close to him, but then he's going to have to use so much energy bringing them all back to their same age that they were, which is going to be quite hard getting an exact date. So Izuku just decides not to bother, as he would end up creating a team, where he would then be situated on the top of the team, being the team leader, as the cavalry battle would then begin. People would surround Izuku, knowing that he had the 10 million point headband, as Izuku would know that his best option was to stall. So, as Izuku was looking for some sort of way to get out of this, the person below Izuku would then tell him that they should probably create some sort of smoke screen or something, or a mirror, as this person had a random quirk. As they were in Class 1C, they were able to just change anything that they were to touch into something else. As Izuku would nod his head, saying, "Yeah, that sounds like a good idea." As this person would then decide to throw down some smoke bombs. Well, they weren't in Class 1C, they were in the support course, my bad. So the support course throws down some smoke bombs, causing a distraction, where they then use their quirk to distort the images of Izuku and their team to make them look like something else, where they would then travel to the back of the Coliseum, basically looking for other people to try to get. They would also distort the headband to make it say like 25 or something, so no one would end up going after them. As they would be around, Izuku would grab a couple headbands as the match would end up beginning. As it would end up finishing, they would then put down their distortion quirk, where everyone would then realize that Izuku had disappeared after the smoke would end up clearing up, and they couldn't find him. However, once the distortion just diminished, they all realized how foolish they really were. So, as that would end up finishing, the final event would end up being told. It was a 1v1 tournament. Now, this 1v1 tournament, Izuku is going to be the first up, Midnight would say, and Izuku versus Shinso, the first place and the last place. Let's see how this goes, as everyone who wasn't competing would either be transferred up to the stands or down into their waiting room, watching the TV, waiting for something or their name to be called. As the match would begin, Izuku would see that Shinso started talking to him. Izuku had been told what his quirk was, so Izuku knew he had to keep his mouth shut. As he remembers training, the people training him told him that anyone could have quirk. If anyone tries to talk to you, this could either be trying to draw out the fight, because they might be waiting for their quirk to activate, or that means they could be having a brainwash quirk. So it's best just to stay silent at all times. Not only just to stay hidden if you're being hidden, or to stay just sleek and just not be seen at all, you should always stay silent. It's one of the best things you could do during a hero, especially in the day, as if you're going to be loud in the day, you're just going to be easily recognized, especially in the night as well. Always be silent on hero work. It was a strange just lesson that they repeated over and over to him, repeating the same words. Silence. It was key to his hero work, as Izuku would rush over towards Shinso before punching him right in the face, as Shinso would be sent flying backwards as he would catch himself barely from falling out, as he would rush over to Izuku trying to throw punches. However, Izuku would dodge all of them, as he would then punch Shinso right in the gut before slamming his head down into his knee, as Shinso would then fall down unconscious. Izuku had gotten many different martial arts training from everyone that was training him. They all decided that he needed to know something else besides his quirk, just in case he were to not be able to use it. So as that would happen, Izuku would go on to the next round, as his opponent would happen to be a person by the name of Shoto Todoroki. Izuku had managed to defeat him once with the help of Bakugo, so he thought he could beat him again. So as the match would end up beginning, Izuku would launch himself towards Todoroki, who would slam his foot down as an icicle would be sent flying, protruding out of the ground right at Izuku. However, Izuku would twist his body, dodging the icicle, as he would then be face to face with Todoroki, as Izuku's hand would land itself one-way ticket right into Todoroki's face. As Todoroki's face would be pushed back by Izuku's fist, Todoroki would start to fight it, before going for a punch as well. Come on, Todoroki, you know damn well you're not going to win this fight without using your fire. Todoroki would only glare at Izuku before sending another iceberg at him, as Todoroki would yell that I'm not using that damn bastard's fire, as Izuku would realize what was going on. Something must have happened, or Todoroki has some sort of issues with Endeavor, and so he does not want to use his quirk. Remember, Izuku is quite smart, having been trained by some of the best. So Izuku, hearing this, would yell that it's his fire, not his father's. Kinda messed up there. As Todoroki something would click in his mind, as fire would then start going all throughout one of his arms, rushing towards Izuku, who would then have ice around one of his fists trying to punch him. However, Izuku would grab this fist, as the ice would then start sticking into Izuku. As Izuku's hand started to bleed, he wouldn't care, pushing Todoroki's hand back, as Todoroki's other hand would then swing, as fire would go right over the head of Izuku, who had dodged the punch. As Izuku would then, with his one last remaining hand, punch Todoroki right in the stomach. As his now free hand, Izuku would power up his quirk, rewinding Todoroki back into a child. As Todoroki now wound, as the match would end up being called off, since Todoroki really couldn't fight as he was now a child, and they weren't about to see some kid about to punt a child across the arena like a football. So as the match would end up finishing, Izuku would fast forward Todoroki back into his normal age, making sure that it's the exact same age he was during their fight. So as that happens, Izuku would be told that he is now in the semi-finals against Momo Yaoyorozu. Izuku would smile, walking up onto the arena. Well, Momo, it appears we're finally facing off once again. I suppose you've been training since our last encounter. Well, I had to have, Momo would start. You really quite easily defeated me with the single chop to my neck, so that's really not just quite useful being able to beat so easily. So of course I had to train. As the match would begin, Momo would create a bow staff before launching towards Izuku. However, she would plant the bow staff right into the ground before flicking some of the ground right into Izuku, as it hadn't been fully cleaned after Izuku or the last fight had been begun. So, with that, dust would fly up towards Izuku's face, where Momo would then send grenades down towards Izuku, where they would all then explode. Izuku would smile knowing that she had clearly been doing training, however it clearly wasn't going to be enough, as he would then launch himself towards her as his hand was glowing bright yellow, where his hand would then connect with the top of her head, as she would then quickly go right down into a child, as the match would then be given to Izuku, as the crowd would see how powerful Izuku's quirk was, where Izuku would then just transfer back to her normal age. Izuku had learned something while he was training, that if he has contact with the skin, he can use his quirk a lot quicker. So, say if he held someone's head or hand, they would be sent back or rewound faster, fast forwarded faster. And it would also work for just going back to the normal age. So as Izuku did this, he would be told that he was now in the finals against a Bakugo Katsuki. Izuku would smile knowing that he was about to make $40 as he would walk up onto the arena. "Well, Bakugo, we meet again. You ready to pay up $40 this time?" Bakugo would then smile, saying, "I don't think that's gonna happen." As the match would begin, both of them would launch towards each other, as they would then just start a fist fight, just electing not to use their quirks, rather much just being using their fists, going out as an all-out just duel as if it was some UFC fight or something, as many of the crowd would wonder why they weren't using their quirks at all, as both of them had also made an agreement that it'd be best to see who doesn't have the stronger quirk but is stronger in fist fighting, which of course would be Izuku, having trained for years. Izuku made sure it was a bet he was going to win. As this was happening, Izuku would easily block all of Bakugo's just hits or punches, as Izuku would swing with his leg, hitting Bakugo square on the side of the head, as Bakugo would be sent flying backwards. He would launch himself back towards Izuku. However, right as he was about to do something, Izuku would grab his arm before flipping him over, much like in canon The Heroes vs. Villains, when Izuku grabbed Bakugo's arm, flipping him up and over. So Izuku would do this, slamming him down into the ground. Bakugo would then choke out blood, where he would then get back up, being met with a punch by Izuku square in his head. Bakugo would try to fight the pain and get through it. Izuku would smile standing over him and would ask for the $40 before punching him one last time, knocking him clean out. It was clear that Bakugo still needed to do a lot of work, just with fist fights, not using his quirk. We see Izuku standing up on the highest part of the podium with a gold medal around his neck. Izuku had just won first place after beating a kid by the name of Bakugo Katsuki out in the finals of the sports festival. Izuku would smile knowing that he had just won $40 from that same Bakugo Katsuki, and now he had a gold medal as well to show to his mother. As Izuku was just smiling high, the announcer would then just start talking. "Congratulations, Izuku Midoriya in first place, Bakugo Katsuki in second place, and now," then they would say the third place, as all of them would walk back to the waiting rooms before being told over the intercoms that they now just have to put back on their UA uniforms and then head back on to where the bus bay was. Once Izuku got into the waiting room, many of the people in his class would just congratulate him, as Izuku would put his just uniform back on, getting onto the bus as they would then head out, leaving off towards the big UA school building. Once they were in their classroom, they would all sit down as Aizawa would walk in. "Alright, class, congratulations Izuku for getting first in the sports festival, and Bakugo in second. All of you should feel proud of the way you placed. All of you made it into the 1v1 tournament, all except the few of you. But even those few that didn't make it, you still made it to the second round, so you should be proud of yourself. And also, please sit here and just chat with each other for an hour or so, as Nezu and I are calculating how many internships you've been qualified to go to, and how many hero agencies have actually contacted us to get you to come to theirs for an internship.
Izuku, I'm pretty sure you already know where you're gonna be going, so no surprise there. Anyway, I'll see you guys in an hour. All of them would just start talking with each other, wondering what Aizawa meant by Izuku, you'll probably know where you're going. Many of them were kind of confused by this, would just let it slip by them, not really caring. Izuku had always been sort of strange, as he had so much more training than any of them. It was like he was leagues ahead of all of them, like he was already the number one hero, standing far beyond all of them had ever dreamed of becoming. So Izuku would just be sitting there for an hour talking with some of his friends along with Momo, as Aizawa would then come back. Alright, Izuku, here you are. Before Aizawa would then go around to every other student, handing out all of the papers, as Izuku would look on it to see that Aizawa had written down a singular name. It was the same hero agency that had helped him out in training him all of those years that he was before UA High School. So Izuku would just say, alright, I guess I'm training with them again, as the weeks would end up passing, as Izuku, along with everyone else, would just go out to their internships that same day to go and start their training. Once Izuku arrived there, they would instantly give him a temporary Quirk usage license, as they would then send him out on his own, as they'd make him put on his hero costume before just throwing him out into the wild. Alright, Izuku, keep track of how many people you've arrested, all of that. We've created a fake hero name for you. It's Water Bottle. Your fake hero name's Water Bottle. Don't question it. Anyway, you're gonna have a week to stop as many villains as possible. Make sure you keep track of all of the villains you stop and what kinds of crimes they committed while you were stopping them. So, anyway, you may now go. As they would then give Izuku a small notebook, as Izuku would put this in his pocket, as they would then start a timer. As Izuku was jumping off on the rooftops above, he would be thinking, Water Bottle. They really couldn't have given me any other creative name besides Water Bottle. Oh wow, look, it's the hero, Water Bottle, with a quirk that has nothing to do with water. I mean, okay, I guess. Izuku would just jump around, continuing on, just looking for any sorts of crimes, as he would start to just stop all sorts of different muggings, crimes, robberies, all of this, as he would just keep on tallying them down in his notebook, while also he was thinking about what better hero name he could possibly pick out. Along the way, Izuku would end up stopping in an alleyway, as he would see someone standing over someone lumped against the wall. As Izuku would smile, knowing, finally, some good action. Stopping time, Izuku would walk up to the person to see the person had a big katana in both of their hands, standing over just some random person who looked to be a hero in costume. Izuku would see this as he would then chop the person's neck before muttering under his breath that time has begun moving again. The person standing over this hero would then go unconscious, having Izuku's blow hit in the exact right place to knock him out, as the hero would stand up, looking around before shakily asking Izuku where he just came from, as Izuku would say, oh, I used my quirk to get here. Anyways, who's that? He looked quite dangerous. The hero would then start just muttering and stuttering, have you not heard? That's the hero killer, Stain. He's killed all sorts of heroes around here. How have you not noticed? Izuku would shrug his shoulders, just saying, I don't know, I just really don't pay attention to the news at all. The person would then run off before asking what his name was, as Izuku would just say his hero name was Water Bottle. The person would look on strangely at Izuku before rushing off again back to his hero agency, where he would then tell a story about how a mysterious hero that just appeared out of nowhere by the name of Water Bottle had stopped the hero killer. As Izuku would then tie the person up before writing hero killer and hero killing as the crime, before underlining that just to emphasize that it was probably a strange and weird just encounter, as the police would roll up, many of them arriving along with an ambulance just to make sure no one was hurt, as they would see Stain tied up completely unconscious and would see a completely unscathed Izuku. Aren't you a bit young to be a hero? Izuku would shake his head before just saying, so anyway, this hero killer guy, is he, strong? The police would nod his head, saying that they've been searching for him for months and he's killed countless heroes. It's crazy that they've never heard of me, or never heard of Izuku, and yet here he was stopping the hero killer as one of his first big crime solves. Some, they would just say, oh, alright, your hero name is? Izuku would give a brief explanation, what he saw, what he did to knock him out, as they would then nod their head before going and filing a report. As news stations all over would flood down to see what had happened, however, Izuku was long gone. Many of them, however, would look on into the empty, abandoned alleyway, as if thinking, wow, this is where Stain was stopped. They were all looking at it, was like just an art piece. As Izuku would continue on, the final day would end up coming, as explosions would rear out all around the city. It was a planned attack. Izuku would go on towards the center, or just the center where everyone was. It was prime time, and everyone was walking back to their homes or going to night shifts, all of this. They were shopping, going out. It was insane, as bombs would end up going off, sending thousands of people flying. Izuku would rush in, stopping time, as he would grab everyone he could, moving them out of the way, grabbing people and grabbing people and grabbing people. As Izuku was doing this, you would then think, oh, what am I doing? Rewinding time back to when just the devices didn't explode, where you would then yell for everyone to move that way. As all of them would wonder, but just listening as Izuku was wearing a hero costume, where they would all move that way. However, as Izuku would start to count down the seconds from when it was supposed to happen, he would stop right at the last second, where he would then start pushing everyone as fast as he could. As after 5 minutes of Izuku doing this, finally they would all be out of the way, as the bombs would end up going off in Times Square. Or not Times Square, just the main center, as everyone would look on in shock as Izuku was standing between them and the prime area where the bombs had gone off. All of a sudden, a big purple portal would open up as people carrying flamethrowers would start to just set everything ablaze, as Nomus would end up coming out, also with fire Quirk setting everything afire as well. Endeavor would end up coming out of nowhere, rushing down the street, yelling for people to move, as Endeavor would then see Izuku or Water Bottle standing there looking on. Endeavor would then ask him who is he and what's he been doing, as Izuku would say he just moved all of those people back, and now he's time and ready to fight these damn Nomu things. As Endeavor would end up nodding his head as both of them would jump off, Endeavor taking some of the Nomus along with Izuku taking some as well. Izuku would easily take care of all of the Nomus, rewinding them back to when they were actually people, as he would then put them into handcuffs, as he would then set them aside to where the police blockade happened to be. Endeavor would see this before Izuku would rush in, knocking Endeavor out of the way, doing his job as Endeavor would yell, saying that he had them, but Izuku would just blow him by. Endeavor, this isn't the time to be wondering and trying to get all the glory. We're only here to try to save as many people as possible. You gotta remember that. As Endeavor would end up listening to this, Izuku would end up defeating all of the Nomus as the attack would end up stopping for the night, as cleanup crews and police would flood the scene taking statements and all of this from people, and many of the people who had been moved would give great stories about how that person knocked Endeavor out of the way and off of his high horse, and was able to easily defeat all of the villains along with getting them to safety just in time. As the police would take note of this, asking to what his hero costume looked like, as none of them happened to know what his name was. As overnight, Izuku's just credibility and all of this exploded even farther from what the Stain incident had given him. So when Izuku walked back into his hero agency on Saturday, they would all just be in shock. Well, kid, you possibly just made the entire country fall apart in love with you. So I'd suggest not changing your hero name as Water Bottle. Sorry for making that your sort of permanent name now, since you already built up a reputation with it. Izuku would then just sigh, thinking about all the great names that he had come up with, and now he's stuck with a Water Bottle. Wow, what a great hero name, of course. He can't wait to become a hero with Water Bottle as his name. So as Izuku would go back into school, many of the people wouldn't know what Izuku had done. Sure, they recognized Izuku's costume, but they didn't know who it was. Oh, well, obviously they knew it was Izuku, but they didn't really want to say anything. However, Aizawa would blink and just say, "Wow, Izuku, you made quite the statement with all of this stuff you've been doing over your internship. Wonder why you all weren't able to manage to beat the hero killer and stop a bunch of Nomus." Maybe you all need to start being trained by Izuku, as many of them would just sort of awkwardly laugh, not wanting to face Izuku after seeing him easily knock out Bakugo. Some thought who even Izuku couldn't beat at the start from how powerful his explosion quirk seemed to be. So as all of this was happening, all of them would end up taking the final exams and passing it, where Aizawa would then tell them they're going to be going on to a summer training camp where they're going to be training with some of the best mountainous heroes, just as an extra form of search and rescue and just territory training, different ecosystem environment types of training. They all would visit their parents, bidding them farewell as they would then hop onto a bus as the bus would go around the city picking everyone up. As the bus would then speed off into a random direction off towards where the mountainous woods were. As it would end up spending hours driving, where it would then end up finding itself in a very remote and desolate part of the woods. You couldn't see a light for miles besides this just building in the middle of nowhere. If a villain were to attack there, they would have a hard time trying to escape without sort of a transportation quirk. Luckily enough for the League of Villains, they have Kurogiri, so all they need to know are the coordinates, and UA and Class 1A are just done for. As the bus would slowly roll into the lot of the training camp, Aizawa would step out before greeting with the other 4 heroes that were going to be training the entire Class 1A and Class 1B. Welcome to your 2-month hell class. All you are going to be doing is eat, sleep, and training. We want you to become the best of the best heroes and save thousands of people, if not millions. So if we want that to happen, and many of you to become the top 20 heroes, most likely my Class 1A, of course, we just want you all to become the best heroes as possible. And so we're going to be doing a ton of different types of training, and you are going to be tired every single day during these 2 months. So you are going to get a full 12 hours of sleep, as much calories as you need from what you've burned off to keep you in the exact same shape you are in, if not even better. We just want you to get better shape, better stamina, everything. As if not, you're not going to be able to be a hero. This is a new thing this year, and we want this year's class to easily overtake the top 10 heroes within 3 years. So we expect highly of you. As Aizawa was saying this, the training would end up beginning, as someone would start to run, as people wouldn't know what to do. Aizawa would then tell them, you all have to catch him, and if you don't, you all don't get dinner for the next 3 days. Or any food, rather, for the next 3 days. Only water. So I suggest you speed off now. Izuku would stop time, as he would rush off to where that person was, deciding that it's best for them just to get food before Izuku would then wait to think. Well, I'd at least make it a little suspenseful, so why don't I wait until he's right at the finish line, and then, right as he is, I stop the time and grab him before anyone can even notice. As all of this was happening, Izuku would mutter that time had begun moving again, as everyone would then jump off, speeding off towards where he was, as Izuku would then go into the woods, deciding that he'd find them eventually, as he would ask Aizawa where the finish line was. Aizawa would point to it before telling Izuku that he can't just sit there and camp. So Izuku would decide to run off with them, as he would end up meeting with his class, stopping time as he would end up catching up to where the person was running off to, as Izuku would hide in the woods, slowly watching him from afar, jumping from tree branch to tree branch, keeping his distance so he couldn't smell him or even hear him. As Izuku would see, he would see the person about to stop through the finish line, as Izuku would stop time. Rushing to him, he would end up grabbing the person by the neck, completely incapacitating them, knocking them out. As time would begin moving again, as Izuku, now with the unconscious giant, as it would then start to fall backwards behind the finish line, Izuku would jump up as dust would fly in the air from its body hitting the ground. Aizawa would be shocked seeing Izuku appear out of nowhere before shrugging, thinking that he'd expect no less from Izuku, being that he's the star student in all of the first years, and maybe even UA, that is. As Aizawa would think back to Mirio in Class 1A, or 3A. As Aizawa was thinking this, Everyone else would end up seeing the unconscious person, thinking Izuku must have done it, as I would sadly give them all food, thinking it would have been so much fun seeing their faces, realizing that they're not going to be able to eat for the next 3 days. It's a shame Izuku had to be in my class this year. It's really a shame. Aizawa would say, as all of the class would end up sitting down enjoying a nice bit meal so that they can get lots of energy for the day for tomorrow, as that day would end up beginning, where they would all be forced to run around the mountain several times, as they would then begin the same training as Aizawa had given their Quirks, as these heroes had spent weeks analyzing and just looking for the best form of training for all of them, so that they can gain as much strength as possible and just to expand their Quirk usage as far as possible in the next 2 months. As the final day would finally approach, everyone was completely exhausted, as Aizawa had decided to give them all a day off, where they would then at night everything would start to change. Aizawa would tell, alright, that ends your day off. So anyways, we have a fun activity for you all to do. Since it's nighttime now, there's an entire forest and just a blank dirt, just a lot of land out in the forest. So why don't you guys take a jog out there and try to beat Izuku? We'll come with you, of course. Well, at least I will. These guys will stay back and monitor everyone else staying inside having to do summer school. So, anyways, let's begin. As all of Class 1A and Class 1B who had passed the final exams for that year would all rush off to the dirt lot to face off against Izuku. As Aizawa would then see them all there, as Izuku would be standing there, as Aizawa would then tell all of them, pointing towards Izuku, that they now have 25 minutes to beat Izuku. As all of them would rush off towards Izuku, as Izuku would then stop time, as everyone who was still out separated, so they weren't really clumped up in a big group, Izuku would go in just punching everyone in the stomach, knocking the breath out of all of them. As Izuku would go around doing this, you would mutter that time had just begun moving again, as everyone who was just behind him got just completely destroyed, falling down to their knees or down to their side, gasping for air, not able to breathe, as Izuku would knock the air out of them. As Izuku would then dodge all of the incoming attacks, as many people were still shocked. Izuku would easily knock these people out with a single punch, as it looked just completely like a bloodbath. It was much like Mirio's fight against the entirety of Class 1A in Canon My Hero Academia. As Izuku was doing this, however, an explosion would go off, much to the one that happened in just prime time in the city where Izuku was taking his internship. As Izuku would see this, blue fire would explode over the horizon and tree line, as Izuku would look on in complete shock. As Izuku would be looking on, he would end up seeing people come out of the trees, looking on as if they were about to attack all of the UA students. As Izuku would see this, he would look on towards Aizawa, as he would then grab his sword out of his belt, having not had to use it for quite a while. As Izuku would stop time, he would rush around before slicing every single tree around them in half. As Izuku would slice all of the trees, making the dirt patch quite a bit larger, as he had destroyed 2 trees from the dirt patch into the forest. So as all of this would happen, all of these trees would fall down onto everyone below them, crushing them instantly. As time would begin moving again, all of these people would be stuck or even killed under all of these massive trunks of these trees. They were completely massive trees, and so these guys didn't stand a chance against them. As a portal would then open up again, as Shigaraki would be clapping. Well, 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 if it isn't the star student of Class 1A along with UA. Be a shame if you were to, go missing. As Izuku would start to fall through a portal, as he would then stop time once again, much like he had done in the USJ, where he would then grab a hold of one of the students next to him, as he would then push up, pulling himself out, as he would end up grabbing the person's hands, as the portal would end up remaining, as the time would begin moving again. Izuku would feel the person pull against him, having Izuku just pulled on him to get up, but he would pull him back out of the portal, as Kurogiri would just say, "Sir, I don't think that's gonna work anymore. He's clearly been able to get out of the portals, even after the 2 times we've done it to him." Shigaraki would nod his head before saying, I guess we'll have to do something else then. As all of them would end up being surrounded by even more villains, saying, Alright, we want all of Class 1A to come with us. We don't care about those nobodies, Class 1B. They can be spared for now. Just know once Class 1A is gone, they'll have to come with us once more. As all of the Nomus would end up coming out of the tree line, having stayed back within the confines of Kurogiri's portal. Once you would let them free, all of them would be holding civilians along with everyone. Well, they wouldn't be holding civilians, they would be holding all of the heroes and the students and their fellow classmates that had stayed back to do the summer school, as they would be holding them by the neck, using them as a threat. As many of them not sure what to do, as they would then say, fine, I guess you can take us. As Bakugo, Todoroki, Izuku, Momo, Ida, Aizawa, and many of the people there would give themselves up, allowing for this all to happen. Izuku would think that he could probably use his time stop to beat him, but he's already used it so much, and if he uses it one more time for a long enough period, which would cause enough to destroy all of the Nomus, especially if he uses his rewind or fast forward, he'd probably get knocked out, and he doesn't want to get into the hands of these villains, because Izuku knows if he ends up going with them, the villains would probably be satisfied. Izuku heard him. He knew what was the minds of going on in heroes, and he had been taught certain situations just like this. So Izuku was going to go along with some of the risky training, because things like this could be completely 50-50. So as Izuku would say, fine, I guess I'll go with you. As the Nomus would all drop the people, as Izuku along with everyone else would end up falling through a portal, as the Nomus still had their hands really close, just to make sure Izuku didn't try to pull something. So as everyone's falling through, Izuku would end up being met in a massive area. However, before core-canceling handcuffs could be put on him, Izuku would instantly stop time right as he got out of the portal. I'm not a fool, Shigaraki, like you might think heroes are. It's a shame you actually had to fall for something as stupid as this. As Izuku would then grab the falling Shigaraki by his leg, pulling him completely out of the portal, grabbing him by his neck, before slamming him down into the two other people that happened to be in the hideout as well. As Izuku would slam Shigaraki into them before throwing him into all of the glass behind, as Shigaraki would be laying motionless in air, having lost contact with Izuku. As Izuku would say time has begun moving again, Shigaraki would slam right into a bunch of these alcohol bottles, as shards would go flying, landing in his eyes along with his face as he would scream out in agony. The two people who Izuku had hit him against would just be sent flying back, and they would get up just in shock, as Izuku would stop time before rewinding both of them down to when they were just babies. Well, not babies, he would rewind them back to when they were kids before putting them on a couch, telling them that they need to be quiet. As Izuku would see both of them, he would then grab Kurogiri's metal plate, as he would rewind him, where he would then rewind back into a mysterious hero, where Aizawa would then recognize him just being in complete shock. It was a hero that he was friends with back in UA that happened to go mysteriously missing. As that would end up happening, Izuku would look on towards Shigaraki, who would end up getting up, still holding both of his eyes. Damn you! What the hell? As Shigaraki would jump up before an arm would end up being met, before Shigaraki could end up fighting Izuku. Calm down, Shigaraki, I'll handle it from here. A giant person with a fake Darth Vader-looking mask stood right, towering over both Shigaraki and Izuku. My, is it the Izuku Midoriya that I happen to meet? Well, it's quite nice to meet you for the first time. Izuku would feel odd having recognized that voice. He had heard it over phone calls many times before, as Izuku would look on as the person standing before him would then sort of laugh, in a very twisted, odd way. I guess you recognize me, young Izuku. It's finally time you were able to meet your father. as Izuku would look on in complete shock. What? Isn't that funny? Someone who's destined to become one of the greatest heroes of all time. Their father's the greatest villain of all time. It's quite actually cliche. I'm surprised this isn't some sort of movie plot. Well, anyways, that's enough is enough. I could care less if you're my son or not. You're still gonna die or join my ranks either way. So what is it? Die, become a Nomu, or join the League of Villains? I'll let you decide. As All For One would put his hand out towards Izuku, offering to him, as the entire world was basically sitting in All For One's hands. All Izuku had to do was shake his hand, and everything Izuku ever wanted would come true. However, Izuku wasn't having this, as he would then grab All For One's hand, as All For One would smile under his mask before Izuku would slam it down for trying to throw All For One back. As All For One would be thrown back into the shards of glass, as he would then stand up, shaking all of the shards of glass off of his suit. Well, that's not what I was expecting. Here, why don't we go into this nice dirt patch for our fight to happen? It wouldn't actually be quite cool if we were to fight in some sort of bar. That simply isn't the case, as he would then create a portal, a gooey weird portal, transferring all of them, including Izuku's class, into a massive, just abandoned city. As Izuku would see this, All For One would flatten a building before saying, alright, here's where we should fight, as he would launch himself towards Izuku. However, Izuku would stop time, getting out his laser sword before slashing up against All For One. As time would begin moving again, Izuku would dodge All For One, as his mask would then slowly split apart, as All For One would feel the burning against his skin along his face. As All For One would grab the helmet, completely just destroying it while it was on his head, as the shards would fall down off of his head, while some still remained sticking into it. Well, there goes for my respirator. I guess this is gonna be a bit harder to have to deal with you. Well, that shouldn't matter. As Izuku would be wondering where All Might is right now, they were in a completely just abandoned city on the other side of the country. All Might couldn't get there for another hours or so, and they had no means of communication either. Sure, Kaminari could do something, but he was knocked out after being knocked out by one of the villains. Luckily, he was able to slip into the portal after being kicked by one of the Nomus. So, as all of this was happening, Izuku looking on as All For One would end up grabbing a rock before throwing it towards Izuku. Izuku would duck under the rock, however the rock would slam right into many of his classmates, who were hiding behind just some of the abandoned buildings. Aizawa was standing guard, making sure All For One didn't come close. However, the rock would go right through some of the glass, as it would then ricochet off of one of the pillars, hitting someone right in the head, where they would then fall as Izuku would hear a name be screamed out. Momo! What the hell happened? A rock just hit her head. As Izuku would then, what the hell did you do? As All For One would then sort of laugh. Oh, it appears you might have a girlfriend. So is this Momo person your girl or something? I guess I found your weak point, didn't I? As Izuku would stop time, as he would then rush over, as he would end up seeing a rock lodged right into the forehead of Momo. As he would pull the rock out, dropping it as it would freeze in time, he would end up seeing that the rock had completely shattered her skull, and she had a complete lost cause chance of living. She wasn't going to make it out. As Izuku would be forced that he has to do something he's barely ever been able to do, and it takes tons of his power to manage to do it. As he would end up grabbing both of his hands, slamming them down into the earth and rock beneath him, as time would end up completely rewinding itself back to even before All For One had thrown the rock. As time would doing this, Izuku would, I'll be right back, as he would end up seeing All for One reaching down to grab a rock beneath him. However, before he could, Izuku would rush in, slicing off one of All for One's arms. Well, I guess that arm's useless. However, before Izuku could think anything of it, the arm would end up coming right back, flying back towards Izuku, grabbing the back of his neck. As Momo would end up jumping out of the corner behind, yelling, "Izuku, no!" However, instantly a laser would be going right through her neck, as she would end up being just completely dead, as it had completely destroyed, decimating her brainstem in an instant. As her limp body would fall down to the ground, Izuku barely able to look over his shoulder to see it. He would then say, "Oh God, not again," as All for One would throw him into a building, as Izuku's hands would touch the ground, as time would completely start to rewind back itself, back to the point that never happened, as Izuku would now decide, "Oh my gosh, not this again," as Izuku, now his sword in hand, would launch over towards All for One, cutting his hand off, as Izuku would then turn behind and cutting it, All for One's other hand in half once again, as its wrist would be slowly trickling on the floor, crawling back to All for One, before it would be stomped and just destroyed by Izuku's fist. Jeez, All for One would then just sort of laugh. "Well, it appears you've seen something like that before. Guess you just decided not to take any chances," as All for One would appear right above Izuku, towering over him, as his fist was right over Izuku's head. As the shadow would loom over Izuku, it would end up going right down towards Izuku's face, over Izuku would duck under it, as Izuku would then take the opportunity, as All for One's fist was down, as his entire body of motion was going down. So Izuku would stop time, appear right behind him, before pushing him down. As All for One was going down, Izuku would slice with his sword, making All for One go clean in two. Was it worth it, All for One? Was it worth killing all of those innocent people? I'd like to know your answer before I end you, as All for One would then sort of just laugh. All those innocent people. Everyone's sinned in their life. It just matters what type of sin it was, or how bad it was. No one's truly innocent, Izuku. When will you learn that? As All for One would then sort of laugh, as his hand would be wide open, looking like it was clenched, as Izuku would get worried, looking back at his class, as he would see massive boulders standing over them, as it would then fall, completely destroying his entire class, as All for One would then sort of just laugh. "Well, it appears your class is dead now, Izuku. Nothing else you can do." Izuku weakly put his arms down to the ground before screaming out in pain. This was the third time he had used that technique to rewind time, as Izuku would completely rewind the time back, as that had never happened, as Izuku would end up cutting All for One clean in half, saying, "This is it, All for One. There's nothing you can do." As All for One would then say, "Sure, there is nothing I can do," opening up sort of a portal behind him, as he would then switch out his body using another type of quirk, as Izuku would end up seeing Mo fall right down into this portal. Izuku would reach out his hand, grabbing her hand before trying to reach her out of the portal, as she would end up screaming in agony as Izuku was doing this. Izuku would get worried, pulling her out of the portal even faster, as you would then see half of her body had completely disintegrated, as he would end up seeing a greenish liquid all along her upper torso, as it would completely eat away at her skin. Izuku had realized that it was acid. Damn it, All for One. How does he keep doing this? As Izuku would then stop time once again, rewinding it all the way back to the start of the fight, as All for One would then be standing in front of him. "Now then, Izuku, why don't we begin the fight?" However, before All for One could even continue, Izuku would plunge his laser sword right into All for One's respirator/helmet, as Izuku would rewind time all the way back to the start, just not even having anything anymore, putting it right through his skull, killing All for One instantly, as Izuku would twist his sword, as the limp All for One body would fall backwards. As Izuku would then fall down to the ground, just with his head up to the sky and just wondering, what the hell did I just get into? As Izuku would just be thinking, as years would end up passing, as Izuku would end up just being world renowned, having beaten one of the greatest villains of all time within a second. However, they didn't know all of the pain that Izuku had went through to just do all of that. And this is where the story is going to end for anyone that would like to just think about ships. However, this is where the main story doesn't come to an end, as years would end up passing, as we now see the UA graduation, as Izuku would end up walking up, just accepting his diploma, walking off and just looking down at it, seeing his hero name, Water Bottle, so he would then end up walking out of the campus. As he was there, he would end up meeting up with Momo, who would say, oh, Izuku, I've had these feelings for you ever since you saved me from that robot. Do you want to go out sometime? As Izuku would then look down towards Momo before saying, sorry, Momo, you're more of a sister to me. And that is where this What If ends. I hope you all did enjoy What If Deku had a time quirk. It was really fun to make, and I hope you all did enjoy it. I thank you all for watching once again, and goodbye.